Welcome to the presentation, The Indigenous Experience. My name is Craig Hill, and when I was asked to do this presentation, I was quite excited. I have a long association with Aboriginal people. My first association in professional context was as a former prison officer, where I learned of the injustices against Aboriginal people and learned a bit about the Aboriginal people and their culture. After I left being a prison officer, I became founder and chairman of an Aboriginal reconciliation group in Goulburn, New South Wales, a position I held for 2 years. Then I spent a year at Woorabinda Aboriginal community in central Queensland as the TAFE Director of Studies at the local high school. From there I spent a year out at Rockhampton in Queensland as an after-school tutor for Aboriginal street kids, and then I moved to Inverell, New South Wales, where I was manager for an Aboriginal corporation. I also worked with homeless Aboriginal people in Brisbane, Queensland. Indigenous tourism is an integral part of Australia's tourism product offering. International tourist numbers are quite high, domestic tourist numbers are quite low. Low domestic tourism numbers have a negative effect on the sustainable development of Indigenous tourism, and this presentation will address these problems and suggest solutions. Next, we're going to look at a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis for Indigenous tourism in Australia can help identify the industry's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. This analysis is essential for Indigenous tourism operators, policymakers and other stakeholders to develop strategies that promote growth and sustainability. So some of the strengths that we have in Indigenous tourism is it offers a unique opportunity to showcase the rich and diverse cultures, languages and traditions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Another strength is authentic experiences. So Indigenous tourism provides authentic and immersive cultural experiences that appeal to travellers seeking meaningful and educational encounters. Sustainability. Many Indigenous tourism operators prioritise sustainable and eco-friendly practices which align with the growing demand with responsible and ethical tourism. There is community involvement. Indigenous communities are often active participants in the tourism industry, allowing them to benefit directly from the economic opportunities it creates. There are the unique landscapes. Indigenous tourism often takes place in stunning, remote and pristine natural environments, offering visitors a chance to explore Australia's most breathtaking landscapes. Partnerships are also a strength. Collaboration with mainstream tourism business has expanded the reach of Indigenous tourism offerings and increased their viability. Some of the weaknesses are desperate economic disparities. So many Indigenous communities face economic disparities which can make it challenging to invest in and sustain tourism businesses. There are infrastructure limitations, so remote locations often lack necessary infrastructure, including transportation and accommodations, which can hinder tourism development. There are seasonal variations. Indigenous tourism experiences can be highly seasonal, leading to income variability and sustainability challenges. Cultural appropriation risks. There's a risk of cultural appropriation when non-Indigenous operators offer Indigenous experience without proper understanding, respect and consultation with the communities. And of course we have land right complexities. Navigating land rights and ownership issues can be complex and impact the development and management of Indigenous tourism ventures. Some of the opportunities we have are the growing demand. There is a rising global demand for authentic and culturally immersive travel experiences, which Indigenous tourism can cater to. Sustainable tourism. Indigenous tourism operators can capitalise on the trend towards sustainable and eco-friendly travel by promoting their commitment to responsible practices. Cultural preservation is also an opportunity. Indigenous tourism plays a crucial role in preserving and revitalising Indigenous languages, arts and traditions, ensuring their transmission to future generations. Collaboration. Expanding partnerships with mainstream tourism operators can broaden the reach of Indigenous experiences and attract a more diverse clientele. Digital marketing, leveraging digital platforms and social media can help Indigenous tourism operators reach a global audience more effectively. Some of the threats we have are cultural sensitivity. So maintaining cultural sensitivity and authenticity in tourism experiences is a continuous challenge, as operators must balance sharing their culture with preserving its integrity. There is a regulatory compliance, so Indigenous tourism operators must navigate a complex web of regulations, permits and licences, including cultural heritage laws and environmental regulations. As we spoke about before, the COVID-19 impact, Indigenous tourism, like the broader tourism industry, remains vulnerable to pandemic-related disruptions and travel restrictions. There is competition, so the increasing interest in Indigenous tourism has led to growing competition, which can make it challenging for smaller operators to establish a foothold. And last, we have land and resource access. As more tourists visit Indigenous lands, issues related to resource management and access need to be carefully managed. This is to avoid overuse and environmental degradation. To capitalise on the strengths and weaknesses while addressing the weaknesses and threats, to capitalise on the strengths and opportunities while addressing the weaknesses and threats, it is essential to foster cooperation between Indigenous communities, government agencies and the broader tourism industry. Policy support, infrastructure development and initiatives aimed at ensuring the equitable distribution of tourism benefits are crucial for the sustainable growth of Indigenous tourism in Australia. Next, we'll look at the target market, or the market segmentation. Identifying and targeting the right market segmentation is crucial for the success of Indigenous tourism in Australia, especially when focusing on the domestic market. The target market for Indigenous tourism within Australia can be defined based on various factors, including demographics, psychographics and travel preferences. On the following page are some key considerations when defining the target market for Indigenous tourism in Australia. First of all, we look at domestic travellers. The primary target market for Indigenous tourism within Australia is domestic travellers, including Australian residents from various states and territories. This group can be further segmented based on the following factors. Age. Consider targeting a range of age groups from families with children to retirees, as different age groups may have varying interests in Indigenous experiences. Location. Focus on major metropolitan areas as well as regional areas to attract a geographically diverse audience. Interests. Identify travellers who are interested in cultural experiences, history and sustainable tourism. Cultural sensitivity. Target travellers who are culturally sensitive and are interested in learning about and respecting Indigenous cultures. And education. Appeal to those who are seeking educational and informative experiences. Another way of segmenting the market is school and educational groups. Target local schools and educational institutions to promote Indigenous education and cultural awareness through field trips and organised tours. Indigenous tourism can serve as an educational tool for students. Our next group is special interest groups. Identify and target niche markets such as birdwatching groups, hikers or art enthusiasts who may be interested in Indigenous experiences that align with their interests. Cultural and art enthusiasts. Focus on individuals and groups with a strong interest in Indigenous art, music, dance and storytelling. We can look at family travellers. Promote Indigenous tourism experiences as family friendly, as many families seek cultural and educational experiences when travelling. We can use the domestic tourism market for business and team building. Offer Indigenous experiences as part of corporate retreats, team building activities and conferences, as these events often include cultural and educational components. Another group that are quite an attractive group are retirees and seniors who have the time and interest in exploring the diverse cultures of Australia. We can look at the local communities, so engage local communities as they can be a source of support and customers, particularly if you offer community events, workshops or cultural celebrations. And repeat visitors. Encourage repeat visitors by offering different experiences or seasonal events, ensuring that your offerings remain fresh and appealing to those who have visited before. It's essential to conduct market research, survey potential customers and gather feedback to fine-tune your targeting strategy and tailor your Indigenous tourism offerings to the preferences and interests of your chosen segments. Additionally, effective marketing and communication that emphasises the uniqueness, authenticity and educational value of Indigenous experiences will be key to reaching your target market and attracting domestic travellers interested in exploring Australia's Indigenous cultures. So the solution, or potential solutions. Addressing the decline in domestic tourist interest in Indigenous tourism in Australia requires a multifaceted approach that involves collaboration, marketing, education and community engagement. Here are several strategies to help reverse this trend. Community involvement and empowerment. Actively engage Indigenous communities in the development and management of tourism initiatives. Empower them to have a significant role in decision making and revenue sharing. Ensure that Indigenous communities are the primary beneficiaries of tourism activities. Some of the educational initiatives are develop and promote educational programs aimed at raising awareness about Indigenous cultures, histories and traditions among the general population. This can include school curricula, community workshops and online resources. Partner with educational institutions to incorporate Indigenous studies into their programs. Next, we look at cultural sensitivity training. So provide cultural sensitivity training to tourism operators and staff. This training ensures that all interactions with Indigenous communities and tourists are respectful and culturally appropriate. Next, we come to digital promotion and marketing. So utilise digital marketing strategies including social media, websites and online travel agencies to reach a broader domestic audience. Share engaging and educational content that showcases the unique experience offered by Indigenous tourism operators. Again, we come back to collaboration with mainstream tourism operators. So partner with the mainstream tourism businesses and tour operators to include Indigenous experiences in the package. This can expand the reach of Indigenous tourism offerings and attract a wider audience. You can conduct special events and festivals, so organise and promote Indigenous cultural events and festivals throughout the year. These events can draw a larger domestic crowd and provide opportunities for immersive cultural experiences. We need to have accessible infrastructure. Improve infrastructure in and around Indigenous tourism sites, including transportation, accommodations and visitor centres. Make these locations easily accessible to encourage more travellers to visit. Another solution is to diversify the offerings. So expand the range of Indigenous tourism experiences to cater to a broader audience. This may include art exhibitions, music performances, workshops and culinary experiences. Promote sustainability. Highlight the commitment to sustainability and eco-friendly practices in Indigenous tourism initiatives. Many travellers are increasingly interested in responsible and sustainable travel. Next, we have feedback and adaptation. Continuously gather feedback from both tourists and Indigenous communities to adapt and improve offerings based on changing demands and expectations. Cultural preservation. Emphasise the importance of cultural preservation in marketing materials, making it clear that by participating in Indigenous tourism, visitors are contributing to the preservation of Indigenous cultures. Our next step is collaborative policy support. Advocate for government policies and initiatives that support Indigenous tourism, including funding for infrastructure development, training programs and marketing efforts. Another important factor is inclusive pricing and accessibility. Ensure that Indigenous experiences are priced fairly and are accessible to a broad range of travellers, including families and budget-conscious tourists. Promotion through local and regional tourism bodies. Collaborate with local and regional tourism organisations to promote Indigenous tourism offerings through brochures, visitor centres and regional marketing campaigns. Reversing the decline in domestic tourist interest in Indigenous tourism requires a concerted effort by Indigenous communities, tourism operators, government agencies and educational institutions. By working together and implementing these strategies, Indigenous tourism can be revitalised and promoted as a unique and educational experience for domestic travellers. In this slide, we'll look at the feasibility evaluation. Conducting a feasibility evaluation of the solutions for increasing Indigenous tourism in Australia is a critical step to assess the practicality, viability and potential success of these initiatives. The following factors should be considered in the feasibility evaluation. First of all, economic feasibility. Revenue potential. Calculate the revenue potential of the proposed solutions, considering factors like pricing, visitor numbers, and the diversity of experiences. Assess whether the revenue generator can cover operational costs and provide reasonable profits. So costs and investments. Estimate the initial capital cost required to implement the solutions, including infrastructure development, marketing expenses, and staff training. Analyse the return on investment over a specified period. Our next point we'll look at is market demand and competitive analysis. So we need to conduct market research. Conduct thorough market research to understand the demand for Indigenous tourism experiences. Analyse current market trends and competitors in the Indigenous tourism industry. The target market analysis. Evaluate whether the target market segments identified align with the proposed solutions and if there is a sufficient and growing interest in Indigenous tourism among these segments. We look at legal and regulatory compliance. So, of course, we need to have compliance with regulations. Ensure that the proposed solutions comply with all relevant laws, including cultural heritage, land rights, environmental and safety regulations. Permit and licensing requirements. Assess the feasibility of attaining the necessary permits and licenses to operate Indigenous tourism activities. Operational feasibility. Infrastructure and logistics. Evaluate the feasibility of providing essential infrastructure, including transportation, accommodations, and visitor facilities, especially in remote locations. Sustainability is a factor. Consider the feasibility of implementing sustainable and eco-friendly practices in operations, taking into account resource availability and environmental impact. Cultural sensitivity. Assess the feasibility of maintaining cultural sensitivity and authenticity throughout the visitor experience. Community engagement and empowerment. So we need community support. Evaluate the level of support and commitment from Indigenous communities involved in the initiatives. Ensure their active engagement and empowerment. Revenue distribution. Assess the feasibility of a fair revenue distribution model that benefits the Indigenous communities and individuals directly. Marketing and promotion. So marketing strategies. Examine the feasibility of the proposed marketing strategies, including digital marketing, partnerships with mainstream operators, and cultural events. Evaluate the budget required for effective promotion. Reaching the target market. Assess whether the chosen marketing channels effectively reach and appeal to the selected target market segments. Next, we will look at educational initiatives. So education delivery. Determine the feasibility of educational programs and initiatives, including curricular integration, community workshops, and cultural resources. Assess the effectiveness of these programs in raising awareness. Risk analysis. So we need to do a risk assessment. Identify potential risks and challenges, such as seasonality, cultural appropriation, and the impact of external factors like pandemics. Develop mitigation strategies and contingency plans. The time frame and implementation. So we have to look at the schedule, so the timelines. Evaluate the feasibility of the proposed solutions within specific time frames. Ensure that milestones and deadlines are achievable. Community stakeholder feedback. Gathering input. Seek feedback and input from Indigenous communities, tourism operators, government agencies, and other stakeholders involved in the initiatives. address any concerns and incorporate their input into the feasibility evaluation. Our next point we look at is environmental impact. So we have to look at environmental sustainability. Assess the potential environmental impact of the initiatives and the feasibility of implementing eco-friendly practices. Ensure that the initiatives align with responsible and sustainable tourism. We have to look at the financial viability, financial projections. Create financial projections and feasibility studies to estimate the financial viability of the solutions. Consider factors like break-even points and cash flow. We look at government and funding support. So government support first. Evaluate the feasibility of attaining government grants, incentives and support for Indigenous tourism initiatives. Determine the availability of funding opportunities. And our last point is monitoring and evaluation. So we need to look at the performance metrics, establish key performance indicators, KPIs, to monitor the success and impact of the initiatives. Determine the feasibility of collecting and analysing relevant data for ongoing assessment. A comprehensive feasibility evaluation should encompass these factors and consider the specific context and goals of each Indigenous tourism initiative in Australia. This evaluation process will help identify any challenges or limitations and allow for informed decision making and adjustments to the proposed solutions. To the right, you can see the resources that we have used in preparing this presentation. I encourage you to look them up and find out more about this particularly important topic. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.